This is simply about fairness and common sense.
The nation's most dominant political, cultural, and social issues continue to reverberate here in Georgia for this edition of Political Update. For Wednesday, February 5th, 2025, I'm Tim Darnell, happy to be joined, as always, by Rick Volbaum, one of the lead anchors here at Atlanta News First and one of the nation's most recognized journalists, both broadcast and otherwise. Rick, we heard at the top of the hour Georgia House Speaker John Burns, who yesterday, on Tuesday, February 4th, announced the Riley Gaines Act. This is one of the Georgia lawmakers' top legislative priorities for 2025, and it addresses the issue of transgender girls and women participating in girls' and women's athletic events here in Georgia. Talk to us a little bit about the background on this issue and how it's become one of the most dominant political topics in the United States and here in Georgia.
Well, you're talking about a topic that is not only something that people have been discussing here in Georgia, but nationally as well. This was a big story in the 2024 presidential campaign. Donald Trump made this one of his key talking points because he realized that this was an issue that really had a lot of potency and that really attracted a lot of interest from people on all sides of this issue. And, where a lot of these sort of social issues are very easily divided and you have people on the right feeling one way, people on the left feeling another way. When it comes to transgender athletes competing in sports, this is one of those issues where you really see a lot of crossover because I think that there are people on both sides of the political aisle who can kind of wrap their head around this issue and see it from different perspectives, even though those perspectives might not align with some of their other feelings when it comes to social issues, like abortion, for example, or gun control for that matter, some of the other topics that, of course, have become hot button issues. But in this particular issue and with this particular bill that you're referencing, this has to do with a female athlete, an athlete who was born a woman and who had to compete against a transgender woman. This was an athlete who now identifies as a woman, but who was born as a male, genetically speaking. And so this lawsuit, she actually lost to the transgender athlete. And she sued because of it, saying, look, this is not fair. I should not have had to compete against an athlete who was born a different sex and who now identifies as a woman. That somebody with that type of genetic makeup would have certain certain advantages, certain biological genetic advantages over an athlete who was born a woman. And so, again, this is an issue that I think a lot of people can sort of understand where she's coming from, and even if they might have sympathy towards the transgender community, and so that is exactly what I think that a lot of lawmakers, including here in Georgia with Speaker Burns, are trying to really capitalize on, which is the fact that there is support for this idea that athletes should compete as the sex, the gender that they were born because of the biological differences, of course, between men and women when it comes to, again, biology and just physical makeup. And so this is something actually that we're also hearing at the federal level. We've just learned within the last 24 hours or so that the White House is preparing an executive order. This has become Donald Trump's favorite way of moving his agenda forward. forward since being sworn in for his second term. These executive orders that do not require any kind of legislative passage. They don't have to go through Congress. These are orders that the White House, that the president can just simply put in place. We should mention that they're temporary because the next administration, whoever that is, if they so choose, can wipe away those orders. That's just the way it is from one transition, from one administration to the next. But this is something that the White House is also looking to do, which is to really sort of come down and make a statement and say that from this point going forward, when it comes to athletics, that if you were born a certain sex, even if you identify differently now, you must compete as an athlete of the sex that you were born. And so we'll see what happens. I mean, obviously, if there's an executive order that would take precedent, I would assume, over anything that would be passed at the state level. So we'll see, but it looks as though the executive order that's being talked about and that we might hear more about in the next day or so is sort of in line with what Speaker Burns has talked about as far as his legislative priorities here in Georgia. It looks like they would be aligned, and I think that if you were to do public opinion polls again, you would see support, really bipartisan support, of course not universally, but you would find people on both sides of the issue who could see the perspective, maybe the perspective of somebody who would be opposed to this kind of thing.
And speaking of House Speaker John Burns, our own Abby Kasoris has been following the issue of transgender participation in Georgia's athletic events. And she has this report on the newly unveiled Riley Gaines Act.
This new bill would ban transgender athletes from playing girls' sports at public schools from kindergarten through college. It would also require that transgender students use separate bathrooms, locker rooms, and have separate accommodations for overnight trips.
This is simply about fairness and common sense.
House Speaker John Burns, surrounded by Republican members of the House in the Capitol Rotunda, announcing a new priority bill he calls the Riley Gaines Act, named after the University of Kentucky swimmer who competed against transgender swimmer Leah Thomas for the 2022 NCAA Women's Swimming and Diving Championship and lost. It all unfolded on Georgia Tech's campus.
Men do not belong in women's sports.
That's Gaines on a Facebook post from Frontline Policy, a Christian nonprofit with an activist arm who helped write Georgia's bill.
This bill is one of the strongest, if not the strongest bill now to hit the nation.
25 states have passed bans. The Human Rights Campaign and LGBTQ activist group says bans have caused an increase in hate crimes towards the LGBTQ community.
If this were a really big issue, if women in Georgia were really facing an existential threat in sports of trans women, they would be able to point to more than one instance, and they can't.
Democrats announcing their own bill, the Equal Opportunities in Sports Act, calling out Republicans, saying if they really want to help girls' teams, they would ensure they have better equipment, practice times, coaches, and program funding.
If Georgia Republicans truly wanted to protect girls' sports, they would stop their harping on the non-existent threat by trans athletes and embrace this legislation that empowers our girls.
The Riley Gaines Act dropped in the House hopper. Next, it will be assigned to committee. The Senate has their own version of a bill with a less restrictive ban. We will be tracking both of those bills as they move through the state legislature. In Atlanta, I'm Abby Kasoris.
Rick, that was Abby Kasoris talking about the Riley Gaines Act. And one of our other reporters, Doug Reardon, also has a report on one of the other legislative priorities for House Speaker John Burns, Lieutenant Governor Burt Jones, and Georgia Republican leaders, and that is on the issue of school safety that comes in the wake of last year's horrific school shooting at Appalachia High School in Forsyth County. Let's hear this report first from Doug Reardon.
We want to be proactive and not reactive.
Georgia's House Republican leaders and emergency management officials announcing plans to improve school safety. Their ideas include an app that would let students anonymously report threats and a statewide information sharing system on students who might pose one.
That will allow for the timely transfer of relevant student data between school systems, law enforcement, and mental health care professionals. Just good old common sense.
A see something, send something culture is incredibly important to cultivate in Georgia.
Officials with Georgia Emergency Management said they would vet all tips before interacting with students and called protection of privacy very important. The parents of Richard Aspinwall were at Monday's press conference. Aspinwall, a teacher and coach at Appalachia High School, died protecting students from a school shooting last year that claimed 3 other lives.
I taught him to be that way. Fight for the kids.
Aspinwall's father said lawmakers should be more aggressive about catching threats early.
You know, obviously it wouldn't have helped anything what happened, but maybe we can stop something for the future.
Lawmakers also proposed tax incentives for gun owners who get extra training and who purchase safe storage equipment like trigger locks. The teenage shooter at Appalachia High School was allegedly given the gun by his parents.
I do agree that incentivizing purchase of safe storage equipment is good, right? I just worry that it's not quite muscular enough.
Democrats have been pushing safe storage bills for years, but want it to be law, not just a suggestion.
Really what the goal is, as with car seat laws, as with DUI laws, is to create a culture and expectation of safety, right? We want to prevent people from doing these irresponsible things in the first place.
Doug Reardon, Atlanta News First.
That was my error. Appalachia High School was in Barrow County. My apologies, and thanks to Rick Folbaum for correcting me before we resumed our broadcast. Rick, you know, the issue of school safety is one of the nation's most shameful cultural and social issues. We've seen so many horrible shootings and so many tragic losses of life when it comes to the issue of guns in public schools. Appalachia High School joined one of that shameful list of high schools across the nation last year, and this is yet another legislative attempt to make our public and private schools safer.
Well, this is I think a really a good faith attempt on the part of Speaker Burns and Republicans here in the state of Georgia to try to address an issue that is top of mind, not just for those who were impacted in Barrow County and the Appalachia tragedy, but in other places around our state, including just recently in Cobb County, where a middle schooler actually was able to bring a gun into school. She shot herself in a school bathroom. And so the question is, how did she get that weapon into the school building in the first place? And so we have seen a number of districts around the state try to address this and try to put some new safety measures in place, from any kind of weapon detection devices to actual screeners. In Fulton County, kids are at certain schools are walking through metal detectors and going through a screening that's similar to what you would have if you were to go to the airport and you had to go through TSA screening. Bags are being checked. Other school districts are implementing clear backpack-only rules. And so you see lawmakers trying to find a way to address this problem, because it is something that is, as you said, shameful, but just so tragic. And so this bill that Speaker Burns is introducing this legislative session has a number of different facets to it, and a lot of it has to do with mental health. That is one of the biggest components. And you typically hear from conservatives and Republicans when these types of events take place, that this is a breakdown of our mental health care needs, that people who are in need of that kind of medical attention are not getting it. And so this is a bill that is meant to address that, to provide more resources and funding to help out with mental health resources, and so to try to reverse that trend. Also, there is a way now, according to this piece of legislation, an attempt to make it easier for students to report if they see something, that they can report it anonymously if they know of someone who might be planning to do something dangerous in the school. And it also raises penalties for students who may report falsely of a terroristic type threat. And so this is the approach that the Republicans are taking. Of course, there are Democrats who would like to see more attention paid to gun control. And that is something that Speaker Burns has said he is not willing to do, although he has put in place some language that has to do with safe storage when it comes to weapons in people's homes and making it illegal to not safely store a weapon. That, of course, has some opponents as well. But again, I think that this is an attempt on the part of lawmakers here in Georgia, and we're seeing this around the country as well, to try to wrap their hands around this issue that is plaguing our nation, and something that is top of mind for students and also for parents. And I can speak personally as a parent with 4 kids in grade school right now, and I know how nerve-wracking it is for them, in this day and age, to go to school and to not really know, whether they're going to be safe. And as a parent who walks their kid to the bus stop in the morning, you really do want to have peace of mind. And hopefully our lawmakers will be able to come to some type of agreement during this legislative session that might help to bring that level of comfort for not just for families, but also for teachers as well.
You were speaking about your experiences as a parent. As a parent myself who has a college-age son, I remember very vividly when we would get a school alert on our email or a lockdown that some threat had been uncovered, and just how, as you, in your own words, much more than I could ever express, it's truly a nerve-wracking experience. We always hear in the aftermath of a school shooting, public officials expressing their thoughts and prayers are with families and victims, and yet every time something like this happens, you have to wonder, have we finally reached a breaking point where some sort of substantive action is going to take place? But we always hear about the gun lobby, NRA, and other organizations. Are gun lobbyists really as prevalent and as powerful and as influential as they have been? I remember the NRA actually filing bankruptcy several years ago. Talk to us a little bit about the political pressures that lawmakers feel.
Well, I think that the NRA as an organization has certainly been dealing with some challenges in terms of their leadership, and their former president, Wayne LaPierre, coming under fire for all sorts of things. But certainly there is still a presence when it comes to a gun lobby, gun manufacturers. There are a lot of people who are interested in keeping the Second Amendment strong and not wanting to see any infringement on anyone's Second Amendment rights. And so you have a lot of politicians, and I would say not just Republicans, because there are some moderate Democrats as well. We just had a presidential election where the vice presidential nominee on the part of the Democrats was a hunter who talked about, going out and hunting with his family. And also you heard from Kamala Harris say that she is a gun owner as well. And so you definitely see, I think, on the part of even Democrats now, a recognition that we are a nation where it is written into our Constitution that we have the right to keep and bear arms. And the question is, how do we do that responsibly and safely and legally? And should there be any kind of limits when it comes to possession and sales of guns? There's going to be some pushback, whether it's from the NRA or other interested parties. And certainly we have seen enough of these types of events at schools and shopping malls and supermarkets and churches and, you name it, where there have been mass shootings. Enough people coming forward and saying, look, something needs to be done. And so is there a middle ground? I think that that's what some politicians are looking for, trying to find right now. And let's hope that they can do that.
The other issue that continues to dominate the nation's political headlines is the issue of immigration. Our own Brittany Ford recently visited some very popular establishments and restaurants along the Beaufort Highway corridor in DeKalb County. Let's hear from Brittany Ford.
I like the culture.
Beaufort Highway is home to restaurants, shops owned and or employed by hundreds of immigrants.
All the cultures on this highway. I mean, I even drive down here to get emissions tested. I do all kinds of things on Beaufort. We shop at some of the local little stores.
A place Ann Jones goes to get the perfect bowl of pho.
Normally, this place is packed out by this time of the day.
The area was the target of U.S. Immigration and Custom Enforcement arrests among other cities around Metro Atlanta this week, with officers seen in Chamblee and Brookhaven.
I'm hearing stories of people afraid of going out and eating or going out to stores, and I'm even hearing reports of some kids not showing up to school. It's very concerning.
Brookhaven Mayor John Park says he's worried the recent events will have devastating effects on their relationship with the immigrant community.
And my concern is that, they'll just group us with all the other agencies, and we may have to, work hard to reestablish that trust.
Javier Diaz de Leon, Consulate General of Mexico in Atlanta, says the arrests are not random.
Evidence that a widespread raid is happening. What is going on are focused operations.
That lights up Beaufort Highway and other parts of Metro Atlanta regain a sense of belonging.
We are Brookhaven, and we are strong, and we are together.
Brittany Ford, Atlanta News First.
Rick, the Beaufort Highway corridor in DeKalb County runs from Brookhaven through Chamblee into Doraville and into Norcross. It's one of the most international corridors in Metro Atlanta. Is home to a number of international businesses. DeKalb County and this particular highway has prided itself on its international flavor for several decades now. I don't live very far from the Beaufort Highway corridor in Brookhaven, and yet, as the issue of immigration continues to make its way through the national consciousness, Beaufort Highway has really become a centerpiece of the issue of immigration because of not only the large number of international businesses, but the number of residents who live along that corridor who are natives of other nations.
I mean, this is really something that is hitting home for a lot of communities here in Metro Atlanta and for a lot of communities around the country. We have a lot of different types of businesses that are, that are owned by and run by immigrants. And oftentimes, those are people who have come to our country from elsewhere to make a better life for themselves and their families. They have come here legally. They have gone through the proper process to be here in this country, and they have the right documentation and paperwork to prove it. But it's also a fact that a number of these businesses are also employ a number of workers who have not followed that legal process and who are not here in this country legally. And so there really is a lot of concern on the parts of business owners and workers on Beaufort Highway and again in other parts of Georgia and other parts of the country where, because in just the last several weeks since President Trump was sworn in, we have been hearing about and seeing raids taking place, ICE agents showing up at the doors of businesses and churches and hospitals and all types of places looking for people who have broken the law and who are not here legally. And so what's going to happen to those people? Well, we've already begun to see flights, airplanes that have been that have been filled with illegal immigrants. And we see a number of those flights now flying out of the United States, and a lot of those immigrants who are here illegally being taken to places like Guantanamo Bay in Cuba, the U.S. naval base, which is now being beefed up in order to accommodate all of these people. And so, the Trump administration has said that their priority is going after the violent criminals, the immigrants who are here in this country illegally and who are breaking other laws once they're here. And of course, we all know about the Laken Riley Act, which is the first bill that President Trump signed into law. Laken Riley, the nursing student who was killed on the campus of UGA by someone who was here in this country illegally. And so the Trump administration pointing out that's their priority at this point, going after those violent criminals who may be here in the country illegally. But I think that there are a lot of nonviolent illegal immigrants who are worried that they're next. And what is this going to mean? And what is this going to mean for businesses that may employ people who are here in this country illegally, which is also against the law. So, this is, again, something that President Trump had promised to do when he was running for office, and he won the popular vote in this country. So, I think that he is operating on the assumption that he has a mandate here to go about doing what he promised he would do. And so far, in these first few weeks of his new administration, that's exactly what he's doing. And it is causing fear and concern in communities all over the place.
Wrapping up this edition of Political Update here on Atlanta News First. Speaking of the Donald Trump administration, we know also that former Georgia Congressman Doug Collins has been officially confirmed as the new Secretary of the Department of Veterans Affairs. And we're also looking forward to former Georgia U.S. Senator Kelly Loeffler undergoing a Senate subcommittee or Senate committee nomination confirmation as her potentially becoming the head of the new head of the U.S. Small Business Administration. Those are some of the issues that we will continue to follow here on Political Update and on Atlanta News First and AtlantaNewsFirst.com. We also encourage you to watch and listen to all of our podcasts on YouTube, where you can watch our podcast and also listen to all of the Atlanta News First podcasts on your favorite podcasting platform, be it Spotify, Apple Music, or Amazon. For Rick Volbaum, I'm Tim Darnell. Thanks for watching and listening to today's edition and this week's edition of Political Update on Atlanta News First and AtlantaNewsFirst.com.